Our screen is visible, sir. Yeah, yeah. It's okay, sir.
Is it visible now, no?
Yeah, it's perfectly visible, sir, and you are audible also.
Audible also. I think let's make the video also on.
Yeah, yeah, that would be fine, sir. Very good, sir. Actually, I want to see you, sir. It's long back, sir.
long back. I don't know.
Sir, at the
Giving.
bottom, there is a video icon.
Yeah, I am not getting that one actually. This start video.
Yes, sir.
Can you see me now? Not yet.
Not yet, sir.
No, sir.
Okay, let's start.
Okay, sir.
Good afternoon. Just before noon.
Yes, sir. Very good morning, sir.
Yeah.
So dear participants, now the second session of day 5 of Atal Online FDP is being addressed by Dr. Amitava Mitra on nanostructured magnetic materials. Dr. Amitava Mitra is visiting professor at the Department of Physics and professor in charge infrastructure, Indian Institute of Technology, Jodhpur, Rajasthan. He did his PhD from IIT Kharagpur and worked about 30 years at CSIR National Metallurgical Laboratory, Jamshedpur. His major areas of research interest include magnetism, magnetic materials, and their applications in the field of structural integrity assessment of engineering components. Dr. Mitra published more than 150 papers in reputed journals and filed about 15 patents in India and abroad. Dr. Mitra awarded by National Metallurgist Award, National NDT Award, and he also received Material Research of India Medal in 2011. Dr. Mitra is an USAID Fellow and worked at AMS University, AMS Laboratory, Iowa State University, USA, and JSPS Invitation Fellow and worked at Institute of Material Research, University of Japan. He is also Fellow of Indian Institute of Metal, Institute of Engineers, and Indian Society for NDT. Now, I invite Dr. Amitava Mitra to share this informative talk on nanostructured magnetic materials.
Thank you very much.
Welcome, sir.
And thank you, Dr. Satnam Singh. We are meeting after a long time. And this is the last sessions before lunch. Hope the participants will not feel bored or be hungry for the lunch.
Sir, I want to add here, this is not only the last session of this day, rather it's the last session of this activity.
Oh.
Yes,
So
sir.
I am honored for giving the last lecture.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thanks for being here.
And I am actually most of my time I spent at CSIR National Metallurgical Laboratory. So the work of what I will describe today is the work that I carried out at the National Metallurgical Laboratory at Jamshedpur. And Dr. Satnam Singh is also did his PhD by working at the same laboratory. We work together. Some of the activities also Satnam was closely involved. After superannuating from National Metallurgical Laboratory, I joined at the Indian Institute of Technology, Jodhpur. This is that new IIT. You can see the picture of the IIT Jodhpur. This is in the desert. But if you see, really, this is, you'll not feel like you are staying in the desert. There's a lot of greeneries. And in the desert, in the summer, the wind is a major problem. So the entire campus is surrounded by a big wall. This is an wall. This looks like a fort from the outside. And this building is the academic building. This is the library. And the other buildings are also situated. This is the director's bungalow. And here, along with the physics, chemistry, mathematics, biology, the other engineering streams are materials engineering, mechanical, electrical, and computer science. And the major emphasis of this IIT is now artificial intelligence and the machine learning. So that is the compulsory courses for all the people, including the science graduates who are doing the MSCs and this MTechs also. So major emphasis of this IIT is the AI and ML, artificial intelligence and the machine learning. So if we, today's talk is the nanostructured magnetic materials and their applications. And about the magnetic materials, we can say there are two types of magnetic materials that exist. One is the hard or permanent magnet, where it is a very fat hysteresis loop. That is, total area under the loop is very high. And we have soft magnetic materials, where is the slim hysteresis loop with the area of the hysteresis loop should be as minimum as possible. So for hard magnet, the area should be as high as possible, and for the soft magnet, it is as low as possible. So these are the major differences from this from the material synthesis point of view. So for hard magnet, we want to synthesize the material in such a way that is a very fat hysteresis, and for the soft magnet, it should be as thin as possible. And you see how these materials developed. Materials developed because there is the demand on materials. And how the materials demand comes, people want that my material should be high efficiency, but it should not be costly. So there is a competition always, the high efficiency versus increased material cost. So there is the tug of war between these two activities, which actually inspire the material scientists to develop the materials. What are these activities? People demand high stress levels, that your material should go for the high stress level, high pressure, high temperatures, high speed, more severe environment, more functional properties. But what happens, I need from the business point of view, I need the cheaper material, stronger material, lower sectional area, miniaturized, and this material should have an extended life. So these are the major motivating factor for the material scientist to develop the materials. So we are talking about a material which has a better functional properties, particularly the magnetic properties. So when we synthesize a material, we have to be three things should be in mind. That is the structure, property, and their efficiencies. So basically, we have synthesis. We should get a property. We should have a structure and his performance. So these three are the correlated, and we should guide this one how we can synthesize to get a better property, better structure, and a better performance. The approach to materials, when you are talking about these nanomaterials, there are two approaches. One is the top-down approaches. Probably you have already did all these things, top-down approaches, and we have the bottom-up approach, where the top-down approach is that bulk material disintegrate into pieces and the nanomaterials. Here, the atoms, then the clusters, and then from the atoms, it will be growth as a cluster, and from the cluster to a nanomaterials. So there are two approaches, top-down and the bottom-up. In top-down technique, the starting material is a solid state. In bottom techniques, this starting material is either gaseous or in the liquid state of the matter. And this is the physical process, the method that there are several processes we can go for the top-down. One is the severe plastic deformation. One is the mechanical methods, the cutting, etching, grinding, ball milling. One is the lithographic technique. And another technique is the rapid solidification of the molten alloy. Our talk will be centered about this rapid solidification of the molten alloys. And the bottom-up approach, what are the bottom-up approach? This is the physical and the chemical processes. The physical processes that we go for the physical vapor deposition. We can go for the chemical vapor deposition. We can go for the phase plasma aided CVD also. We have the self-assembled monolayers. So these are the various methods for the bottom up approach. So from the top down approach and the bottom up approach. So what is the advantage of the top down approach and what is the advantage of the bottom up approach? The major advantage of the top down approach, it can produce in the large scale production. Tonnage scale it can be produced. Deposition over a large substrate is possible. Chemical purification is not required. But what is an advantage for the bottom up? Ultrafine nanoparticles, nanocells, nanotubes can be prepared. Deposition parameters can be controlled, and narrow size distribution is possible. And another major advantage is the cheaper technique, and that is the most of the people for the nanomaterials want to go for this bottom-up approach, and that is the through chemical method. They want to go for this one. So this is the major motivation for the bottom-up approach, that a cheaper technique. You don't have to spend a lot of money for your fabrication process. So that is really a good methodology. And in laboratory scale, it can be produced. But if you consider the industry scale, when you require the tonnage of materials, people go for these top-down approaches. What is the disadvantage? That is also the disadvantage of these two methodology. The major disadvantage is for this top-down, the yield has a broad size distributions from 10 to 100 nanometers, varied particle shape and geometry, control over deposition parameter is difficult to achieve. Impurity on the impurity strays, defects, and imperfections get introduced. And major disadvantage is a expensive method as compared to the bottom-up approach. And disadvantage is the large-scale production is difficult. chemical purification of nanoparticles is required. And I told this, we will concentrate on the rapid solidification of the molten alloy. And there are various methods of doing that. One is the melt spinning, in-water quenching, copper mold casting, and many others. And we will concentrate mostly on the melt spinning and the in-water quenching system. So before going to that method of preparation, so what is this rapid solidification and why it is so important? That let us discuss about it. You see, for the preparations, you have to make the alloy and go to the high temperature and make the molten alloys. And if you see how the enthalpy now after the melting, you have to cool down. Now, if you plot this enthalpy and the temperature, you will find that how the melting point, it has to be at the initial stage, it has to be little above the melting point. Most of the cases we go for 100 to superheating from 50 to 100 degrees. Then we cool down, you see, we are reducing the temperature. And when this melting temperature comes, there is a sharp drop in enthalpy and also in the volume. And if you go further and it occurs the volume, it decreases abruptly the value typical in the crystalline phase. From it goes to the crystalline phase, and then if you go further cool the material, then again the temperature decreases and the volume also decreases, enthalpy also decreases, and this is basically driven by the specific heat of the solids. So when you go from the liquid state to this process, then we will find that the material will be formed in a crystalline phase, and there will be the grains in a, rather we can say is the polycrystalline material, and there will be grains in between. So the formation of crystalline nuclei takes time. If its cooling rate is sufficiently high, nucleation formation does not occur. So this process is a very equilibrium process. It is a slow process. But if we now want to cool this material fast, then this process, this crystallization or nucleation for the crystallizations will not occur. So we, instead of holding at this melting point, we are decreasing the temperature first, and this region is called is a supercooling of the melt. We call the supercooling of the melt. And if you further cool this material, then after certain time, after certain temperature, it will not linearly varies. It varies. It gives a curvature and slowly it becomes a solid state. So here it is the melting point, it is the liquid metal, and if we go on decreasing the temperature first, even there will be a time will come, then it will deviate from linearity, and a region which is called the because of the viscosity of that liquid, then there will be the restriction. The viscosity will be so high of the liquid metal, the atom cannot move, and they are randomly frozen in the liquid. So we are preventing the crystallization, and we are randomly orienting the atom by this supercooled and then because of this viscosity process, the atoms are randomly oriented, and we can get a glassy material instead of a polycrystalline material, what we told earlier. So this is the called frozen in liquid structure. This is called frozen in liquid structure, and this is the very common for the silicate glasses, silicate glasses, and form and needs slow cooling rate of the cooling melt. But if what we'll do, if in certain metal, in certain alloy, if we cool very rapidly, very fast cooling. So this is the slowly cooled, and this is the what we usually do for the preparation of silicate glasses. But if we do very fast, then the alloy is again frozen in at a high cooling rate, and we call is the fast cooled glasses. And this material, what the cooling rate? The cooling rate should be 10 to the power 6 Kelvin per second is required for alloy attain the glassy. So this state has different name, that glassy alloy or amorphous phase or metallic glasses. This is a metal. It has the property of the metal, and it has no structure crystalline. So it is called the metallic glasses. So we can go for a frozen in liquid structure, and we can get a structure where the atoms are randomly oriented or the liquid state are frozen in, and this is called the frozen in liquid structure. Okay. Now, how we can characterize this one? This can be characterized that this is the region where it is deviating from linearity to the region where if we get a tangent at this point, if we get a tangent, then this region is called the glass forming region or the glass forming range. This is an important one. So the glass obtained, we have a lower enthalpy than the crystalline and the cooling and high cooling rate. The atomic arrangement will be characteristic of the supercooled melt at low temperature. Although the glass transformation occur over a temperature range, it is convenient to define the temperature to express the difference in the thermal history between the glasses. Although it is the region, so there is a customary to identify a temperature which is defined, which is characterized by the different composition, which is known as the fictive temperature. The fictive temperature, which how we can do it? We can make a tangent and we can make a straight line here. This temperature is called the fictive temperature. So the fictive temperature is the characteristics and depends on the material to material. Okay. Now we will define the how these temperatures are we can do a concept. Now we'll introduce a concept which is called the glass transition temperature. Now, how this glass transition temperature? The glass transition temperature is the temperature at which the molten metal form a glassy phase. At which a molten metal form a glassy phase. How we can determine this temperature? This temperature will be determined by thermal analysis, differential thermal analysis, that is the DSC, and this is that DSC curve. You see, at the point there will be a endothermic peak, and then there is a exothermic peak, and then there is a exothermic peak. So there is a endothermic. This is the glass transition temperature starting, and this is the finish, or the maximum transformation is taking place here. And here the crystallization started, and here the crystallization has started, and go for the maximum crystallization process is going on, and this is the crystallization process is completed. So the entire process is now defined as the glass transition temperature, and another temperature is the crystalline temperature. So what is happening, I told you earlier, the crystalline transformation is a equilibrium transformation. But here, due to the supercooled melt, we are not giving to, we are due to the supercooled, we are going away from the equilibrium. So this is a non-equilibrium solidification process. And when we are going for heating this glass, it will go for, it will have the tendency, we are giving the energy from the outside, and it will slowly become a stable equilibrium process. It will be crystallized. So it will going, this is the glass transition, and this is the crystalline process. And if we want to measure the viscosity of this one, then that is also taking place in this process, where at the transition temperature, at the glass transition temperature, the viscosity changes, become the minimum, and then again viscosity or the mobility of the atoms that takes place towards the equilibrium processes. And you see here, we have also plotted the enthalpy and also the volume. So during this enthalpy and the volume, you see there is a change in shape. And if we can consider a atomic structure in crystal, this is very ordered state. And if we consider the atomic structure amorphous alloy, and then it is a, there is a excess volume is, as they are the randomly oriented, there is some excess volume, and you understand the slow and cooling, this is that amount of the excess volume that is within this one. This excess volume, due to the presence of the excess volume, when we try to heat it, give the heat energy, then due to the presence of this excess volume, these atoms will change their position, which is called the structural relaxation. The structural relaxation, and you understand, as there is a free volume exists, the density of these two was different. The amorphous alloy has a less density than the crystalline alloy, and due to this structural relaxation, there is a change in density also, but the change in density is not that prominent. However, there is a huge change in the functional properties of this alloy. So the structural relaxation gives a change in the properties, but not with the densities. But due to this rearrangement of the presence of this excess volume, the atoms will rearrange themselves. If we go on heating, there will be a structural relaxation takes place, which influence the functional properties of the material. Now, what we are talking about, the slow cooling rate, slowly cooled glass, and the fast cooling cooled glass. What do we mean by the slow? What do you mean by the fast? And how we will determine that this alloy needs a fast cooling rate, or this alloy needs a slow cooling rate? For which we have to go for some time temperature transformations. So glass and supercooled melts are thermodynamically metastable, that you already told. Both can undergo crystallization during the material transformation or more crystalline phases, one or more crystalline phases. It is obvious this property of glass may be depend on the thermal history of the particular sample, and that you also discuss the structural relaxation. So when you are talking about the fast and slow and fast, then how fast? This is determined by the time temperature transformations. TTT, time temperature transformation, TTT diagram. So DTT diagram provides crystallizations of the undercooled melts. What is this one? Let's go some calculations. Let's go from the free energy calculation. Let's go for the free energy calculation of the gives free energy for the liquid state and free for the solid state, because we are going from the liquid state to solid state. So if we see the free energy versus temperature for the solid state, this is the straight line behavior. That is the this is the solid. This is the solid. GS is that, and this is the liquid state. And at the melting point, there is a crossover, which is the crossover where the two energies are equal. That is that delta G is 0. So where G is the gives free energy, delta Hv is the change in enthalpy, and delta S is the change in is enthalpy. And delta S is actually, there is a mistake actually. This is the entropy. Change in delta S is the change of entropy. At the melting temperature, delta G is 0. Delta GV is a 0. Since that is liquid and solid at the equilibrium state, so we can put at GL is equal to, at T is equal to Tm, GL is equal to GS, and from there we can get an equation delta S, that is change of entropy, is equal to delta Hv by transition Tm, that is the melting temperature. So if we replot this one to the equation 1, we get the equation delta Gv is equal to Hv T minus Tm by Tm. So this is an equation. And this is the very important parameter, that delta T. Now, what is delta T? The T temperature, we are concerned, minus Tm. Tm is the melting temperature, delta T. So what will happen if we have a liquid? Now, if we want to cool down, supercooled or whatever want to cool down, then the nucleation will start. And this nucleation, let us consider a solid nuclei will be formed, whose radius is R. Then this volume Vs, the solid state, is 4/3 pi R cube. And there is the interface between the liquid and the solid, that is the ASL, which is a not solid, not liquid, and which is this one, 4 pi R square. And if we go for some calculations, we can see that what we'll get. G1 is in the liquid state. This is VL into GVL, where it is the gives free energy per unit volume. So free energy of the system. And when it is the liquid state, it has the 3 parts. One is that liquid part, one is that solid part, one is the in-between part, that is the surface. So the G2 is a VL minus VS GV, and VS GVS, and ASL, that area, and gamma SL. That is the, what is the gamma SL? Gamma SL is the surface gives free energy per unit area. GVL is the volume gives energy in the liquid state per unit volume. This is the solid free energy, at the per volume. So what is the difference between the liquid and this? This is an equation. And if we go further, we get a equation, the Vs GV plus GS ASL gamma SL. And if we put the value of those parameters, then we have the equation delta G is equal to 4/3 pi R cube GV plus 4/3 pi R square gamma SL. Now it has the two components. One is the volume component and is a negative. So you can see it is a negative, and it has a positive component, that is the interfacial energy. It is like that. So if we combine these two, it gives a peak and go to the negative side. So there is a critical diameter, critical radius, free energy increases are at the critical radius and then start decreasing. So we want to very much interested to find this critical radius. What is this critical radius? So as you can see that this is the maximum. So what we will do, we will differentiate this equation and make it is a 0. So we will differentiate this equation and make it is 0. What we got dj by dr 0, and from there we can get a critical radius r star is equal to, which is proportional to 1 by delta t. And what is delta t? That is the T minus Tm. So putting this critical diameter in this above equation, we will ultimately get an equation which is giving delta G star. Delta is the critical, that is that critical Gibbs free energy, which is inversely proportional to Tm minus T whole square. Tm minus T whole square. That is delta T whole square. What is delta T? That is the Tm minus T. So if we plot this one, it gives a curve like that. And at this stage, actually, the nucleation at this critical free energy for which the nucleation for crystallization starts. This is that critical free energy which depends on Tm minus T whole square, which is the critical free energy for which the nucleation for the crystallization stage it starts. So let us plot this this equation, what is coming here with the temperature and how this time temperature transformation is taking place. You see, at the temperature T is equal to melting point, this term is 0. That means delta G is infinite. So you require an infinite time to get it crystallized. So if this is my melting melt temperature Tm is my melt temperature Tm, and if this is the time, we are plotting a curve with the temperatures by the time, and this will be the transformation. What the transformation? At T is equal to Tm, the delta G prime is infinity. That means at the melting point, although we have shown earlier that at the melting point, the delta G sharply falls, but it is not the case, because at delta T is equal to T, this is infinite. So it will take an infinite time. And so we will get a point for this particular case at T transformation taking place at infinite period. This is the log T, log time, so infinite period. Now, if we decrease slightly this temperature from Tm, that is means we are doing a supercooling, because we are decreasing the temperature slightly from Tm. So what will happen then? It will delta G become decreases. So we require less time to nucleate. So we are getting some points, you can see from infinity. So we are getting some point for the curve, that nucleation curve. So nucleation can take place at this time, at this temperature. So this is a very long temperature. Slowly you can go that, you will get the curves. And when we are going to further decrease the time and the temperature, what will happen? You see, it will move from the linearity, because the viscosity of the liquids will also take place. And there will be a time, if we go below that, we cannot go for any further crystallization. So it will go back again to the very high time. So we will get a curve like that. This is the transformation curve. What at which temperature and time this transformation takes place means this is the point where the nucleation is take place, and they become onset of crystallization of this material, onset of crystallization for this material. So if we want to cool down now from temperature melting point to this one, if we follow this path, if this path curve cut at this point, this temperature, the crystallization started, and then this process of crystallization takes place. This is like that. But what will happen if my temperature is just at the peak of this one? If my cooling rate, this is the cooling rate because the temperature and this is the time. So this represents the cooling rate. So what will happen in this condition, at this condition? If my cooling rate is this one, then at this condition, what happens? They cannot crystallize. So it will go to a glassy phase. So this is the things at which temperature we'll do, at which rate we'll do, that will be determined by this TTT curve. And depending on the composition, the TTT curve, this is the undercooled melt, and depending on the composition, my TTT curve changes. This is a one single composition. So in this case, we require, if my TTT curve is like that, we require a much faster cooling rate. And if my cooling rate, if my TTT curve is like that, then we need a much slower cooling rate for going for the melt to a glassy state. So this is very important thing when we go for the preparation of the amorphous materials through a rapid solidification techniques. Okay. So typical glass forming composition, and depending on the, it is not this all material can be made like that. Depending on the composition, this type of amorphous material will be prepared. And what is this composition? One composition is the transition metal and metalloid, TM 100 minus MX. M is the metalloid. Where transition metals, what the transition metal we are talking about? Iron, nickel, cobalt, chromium, or combination of them. And the metalloid we are considering as a boron, silicon, copper, phosphorus, or a mixture. And roughly this metalloid composition changes from 15 to 25, so that I can get a TTT curve in such a way that we can melt it. We can cooling rate is within our limit. I cannot go for any practical purposes a pure iron to in amorphous phase by this technique, because in that case the pure iron, the TTT curve will be this peak, this nose will come in such a position, the cooling rate we cannot go that fast. So we require some metalloid or some other element to be a alloy formation so that the TT curve can be shifted towards the right hand side. So there are other type of compositions also possible, that is that zirconium and copper based alloys. In this case, the copper should be around 40 to 75%. And there is another set of compositions can be done through this technique, that is the aluminum transition metal alloys, such as aluminum Fe cesium, where X is between 9 to 15. These three alloys, these three group of alloys has the different applications. The first group of alloys, transition metal is the functional applications, particularly the magnetic and electromagnetic applications. Then the transition metal alloys, the zirconium based alloys, zirconium based metallic glasses is the used in the nuclear applications, and the aluminum transition metal based alloys, which is used for the structural applications, in particularly in aerospace industries. So you understand now there is the term, the alloy, which is the glass forming ability. So there is ability of the alloy. So we have to take that alloy type of composition so that its glass forming ability is high. And how we can determine this glass forming ability? The glass forming ability, you know, when this glass is forming, then if we can heat it, then we will get the TG, that is the glass transition temperature. And if we go further heating, we can get, you just remember this curve once again. This is the glass transition temperature, and this is the crystallization temperature. The difference between these two, Tx minus Tg, is the Tx minus Tg is the glass forming, is defined as the glass forming ability of this alloy. So usually this goes to 50 degree or more for good glass forming ability of this alloy. So how we can prepare this material? This can be prepared by splat quenching, can be prepared by melt spinning, planar flow casting, in water quenching, or the copper mold casting. I will go how this type of alloy was developed in course of the time. So this alloy was started developing in the 1960s by Paul Dweck. In 1960, he, just for a curiosity, he thought how we can go for a alloy preparation where we cannot give them the sufficient time to crystallize. That is, means we will go for the supercooling. He started a metallic glass phase of AuSi, gold silicon. How he did? This is this schematic representation of apparatus. This is an induction furnace, and this is a photocell, and this is a piston. What he did actually, he just heat this metal. Heat this metal by an this is your alloy composition. This is an alloy. He heat this metal, and when it come down, and when its liquid is forming, it passes through the photocell. This photocell will excite this piston, and as soon as it will reach, the piston will come together, and there will be heat extraction by this piston. These pistons are made of copper. This heat extraction of the from this and a glass is formed. So you can see once again a alloy which is heated by RF coil, and when this melt and superheat around 50 to 100 degree superheating, it drops from there, it come here, and it was this piston come together and take heat from the both the surfaces. So this was done in 60s, and in 70s. Usually, you see, if you consider the magnetic material, it always require a ordered state. Magnetic materials is always the ordered state. The disordered state usually cannot think of the magnetism should come. But in the 70s, people tried to, so initially there was no work on the front of the magnetic materials. It was only for this curiosity, work on gold alloy, aluminium alloy, magnesium alloy. But in 70s, people started working with, let's see for a curiosity, how we can use, if we use this iron, nickel, and cobalt based alloys. And they found that, yes, these alloys also give a magnetic properties. So after that, a new area has come up which has a lot of applications, and a new area of research has come, that is on magnetic materials produced by rapid solidification techniques. Because you see why it has get this at that much of importance, because in this case the magnetic materials you can use for sensor element, you don't require a huge quantity. Here you may require only small quantity and see the feasibility of this one as a sensors. So there was a initially 70s lot of work was started, and found that their property is much better than the conventional materials. Then people started thinking how we can go for large quantities. Then different innovation take place from this device, from this invention, how we can go for, instead of piston, now this is a copper wheel which can rotate, and instead of this drop which is coming, there may be a crucible, that is the quartz crucible, which is heated by the induction heating, and the liquid and the alloy is there, which is heated. This may be iron, silicon, boron, and we can get in the form of the ribbon. So early 80s, stability in preparation of consistent property obtained, and quantity from few grams to hundreds of grams quantity has achieved. So it has a good market value because its properties, some properties much better the conventional one. So lot of research work has carried out, started carrying from early or late 70s to till date. So this is that where we can go for much higher quantities. This is the system for going for 1 kg system. This is the wheel, copper wheel, and there is a this is an induction furnace, and we can go for much better way of seeing this one. So I don't know where I cannot open it. Oh. Can you not see it, no?
Sir, is it video, sir?
Yes, video.
Sir, you put on the full screen on the PPT mode, then click on the screen.
No, it is not coming.
It's not coming.
And what is this? Cannot open the specified file. I want to show this PPT, this video.
File might be missing, sir, at the background.
Huh?
Link has broken.
Yeah. Let's see. Give me some time. Huh?
So probably you can minimize the PowerPoint and play the video
Yeah,
original
yeah,
file
that's I am
from
doing.
the source.
Is it visible now?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's visible.
Okay, so you can see this is that copper wheel, and this is that crucible, and this is the liquid metal, and this is that uh, this is that induction furnace. So we can go for rapid solidification. The copper wheel is extracting all the heats and make the material supercooling, and we can get in the form of strips.
Sir,
Is
are
this
you showing the video?
are not able to see?
No, sir. We are not able to see the video.
I'm not able to see.
So kindly minimize the PowerPoint.
Yes. Minimize the PowerPoint, and I am running the video. Is it visible?
No, sir.
No, no. Okay, let's see. Let's just give him. I have some time, no? I can go up to on 30, no?
Yes, sir. Yes. Sir.
You can sharing a post. You could use your screen sharing. My screen sharing isn't paused.
Sir, please do not pause the screen sharing, sir.
No, I have not done. I have not done. It is automatically.
Sir, just minimize the PowerPoint from the top
Yes.
right. Minus.
I have minimized.
No, sir, it is not minimized on our screen.
Okay. Can I stop sharing and I can go to that one? I think this video will be liked by the.
Things will not come, sir. The video will not come, sir.
Yes. Yes.
Don't stop the sharing. Don't stop the sharing, please. Probably, sir, you are using some Windows computer or any other software. This is a Windows computer or Linux computer?
No, Windows.
Sir,
But how it is paused?
No, sir, it is not paused. Still, we are seeing the PowerPoint presentation.
PPTs. You please minimize your PPTs and run your video.
I have minimized. But that is not minimized from your point, no?
Yes, sir. Just click there, sir. Just click there. I can see your cursor there, the top.
Will you kindly stop screen sharing and restart again?
Okay, that will be better, maybe.
I think now you can see it, no?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
Yes.
Ji sir, okay.
Okay. Let's see now. This is that liquid metal. This is the crucible, and this is my induction coil, and this is my copper wheel. So copper wheel is extract the heat so that this go for the supercooled region, and by that way we can cool this material almost for 10 to the power 6 Kelvin per second. Okay, and because we are taking the heat away, this material thickness has to be of the order of 10 to the power of the order of 20 to 30 micron. If it is more than that, then it will be very difficult to get this amorphous structure, because in that case the extraction of heat will not be that good. Okay. Is it clear? Any questions from the participants? Can you now see my PPT?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we can go for this after preparation of this material, we have to go for magnetic properties of evaluation, and basically we are interested for this hysteresis loop, and there are few parameters actually for that. That is that the coercivity, which is that should be as low as possible for this hot magnetic material. This is called the slope at this curve is called the permeability. This should be as high as possible, and the saturation magnetization, which should be also as high as possible for this material. So if you consider the material for the crystalline alloys, there are three categories of the crystalline magnetic materials are obtained for the application point of view. These are iron nickel alloys, this is the silicon steel, and this is iron cobalt alloys. You see, I have plotted it between the saturation inductions and the permeability. So for the application point of view, we always try to get the material which has the saturation induction high and the permeability is high. So, but if you see these crystalline alloys, yes, iron cobalt is saturation induction is very high, but its permeability is also very low. The second category is the silicon steel. It is permeability is the moderate, and saturation induction is also very high. This is called the silicon steel because this is basically iron silicon alloys. Iron and 3.5% silicon. These are the iron silicon alloys. But this is the production of this material is just like the steel production, that is melting, casting, and the rolling those. And if you consider the total magnetic material production, the 90% is the silicon steel. This is the major market it is used, and where it is used is most of the transformers, not most, we can say all the transformer has the magnetic materials as a core. For the primary and secondary, there is a core, and this core is basically a magnetic materials, and 90% of this is made of silicon steel. The another alloy, the iron nickel alloy, this is also, you can see the permeability is very high, but saturation induction is quite low. So this is an alloy which is used mostly is a sensor elements because it can respond in a very small field. Now, when we are go from here to a amorphous material, we cannot go make this silicon steel is an amorphous by rapid solidification. We have to add some more element in it. What that more element? This is that boron. So iron, silicon, boron will be the counterpart of the silicon steel. Here, sometimes boron and sometimes boron plus phosphorus also. Similarly, the iron nickel, here also we can have iron nickel, boron or phosphorus. So we can make it a better magnetic materials by rapid solidification by addition of boron or phosphorus or both. But you can also understand by adding a foreign element which is not magnetic, one property you will lose, that is the saturation inductions of the alloy. A saturation inductions of this alloy, because the alloy which was adding, those will not contribute for the magnetic those will are a non-magnetic materials. They will contribute in the magnetic property in a different way, but if you see the saturation magnetization, they will not contribute on that one because those has no moment, magnetic moment. So the existing material, this silicon steel, as I told, this majority of the magnetic materials is made of the silicon steel. It has the two varieties. One is called regular grain oriented, one is the high grain oriented. And what is the property? This is the most important property, that is the loss. Loss means the area of that hysteresis loop. And this is the area of the hysteresis loop. And you can see this is that around 0.65 watt for the regular hysteresis material. And it has the three components. One is that coming only from the magnetic contribution. One part is coming from the eddy current, which is called the classical eddy current. One is called the excess eddy current. You see, this excess eddy current or the classical eddy current, that can be reduced further by increasing the resistivity of that material. And when we go for the amorphous stage, as these material are randomly oriented, the scattering of the electrons will take place more as compared to the crystalline material. So in amorphous state, this material resistivity, yes. Hello.
Okay.
Hello. Is it okay, no?
Yeah, okay, sir.
Okay. So this is another opportunity to reduce these total losses. That is that making the hysteresis loop much slim. So if we go for another things, you see this material, if we consider the anisotropy of this magnetic material, anisotropy means how easily we can magnetize. It has the three part. One is the magnetocrystalline anisotropy, one is the magnetoelastic anisotropy, one is the shape anisotropy. Now, the magnetocrystalline anisotropy, because of the crystalline structure, it will have a major contribution to the anisotropy. Anisotropy means how much energy you require to magnetize in a particular direction. So for a crystalline material, this is the major anisotropy, and these are relatively low value. And shape anisotropy, basically you can control by what should be the shape. This is in your control actually. So, but if we go for the amorphous stage, then this magnetocrystalline anisotropy is not there because this is an amorphous. There is no crystallinity. So we have due to this rapid solidification and going to this amorphous phase, we are reducing the magneto-anisotropy energy and going for the magneto. So major anisotropy is the magnetoelastic and the shape anisotropy. So what are the compositions? I told you earlier, the transition metal plus metalloid, and iron, nickel, and cobalt, or a combination of them. And what is the role of the different parameters? The silicon, boron, and phosphorus. it has a different role. You see disadvantage, I told you the saturation induction decreases. And if you have a phosphorus high, then the casting, that is that in the form of ribbon, that will be very, very brittle. But it has a advantage actually. The permeability and the high and coercivity is low. That is an advantage of adding the phosphorus. So we are getting a set of different alloys, which is called iron silicon based amorphous alloy, cobalt silicon based amorphous alloy, and also nickel iron nickel boron based amorphous alloys. And you can say that although we have compromised little bit of saturation induction, but we have advantage of going permeability of the order of 10 to the power 4. So you are compromising in one respect, but in other respect you are getting advantage. And you see, this is the advantage you can visualized. The dotted curve is basically the iron silicon crystalline alloy, which is called the silicon steel, and the solid curve is basically iron boron silicon alloy, iron boron and silicon alloy. And this is my and you can see there is a disadvantage because we are not going to the saturation induction, which is more than 1.6 Tesla. But what we can get in this case is around 1.4, but we can say there is an abnormal decrease in the area of the hysteresis loop. So if we plot now the same curve as compared to the regular grain oriented or high grain oriented silicon steel as compared to the amorphous or metallic glasses, there is a drastic difference in the weight loss, not weight loss, this loss of energy, that is the area of the hysteresis loop, that is this is the hysteresis loss, this is the what I call classical eddy current loss, and this is the excess eddy current loss. And this loss is reduced because this amorphous alloy has a high resistivity. And what is an advantage of this one? If you go for the transformer core, then for the conventional or crystalline material, this will be heated up. It will be heated up at 49 degrees Celsius. To cool it, we have to put this oil and so. But in this case, you don't require to put any oil because here the heat is around 31 degrees. So this is a big advantage as compared to the when you consider the pollution to the system, pollution to the environment. And this type of transformer is also called the green transformers using these materials. And you see there are a lot of transformers are already in use at different places. And you can just compare this core loss, the core loss for this one, no load loss is equal to 15.4 watts, and in this case 57. So you can understand how much, but there is a little bit high load loss because this amorphous alloy has a high resistivity. So this load loss is little higher. But if you consider the in totality, it is much advantageous for the transformer cores. So the applications of the soft magnetic materials is majority is the transformers, but there is other areas which is called the sensors and transducers. And for the sensors and transducers, we have a biomedical applications, we have a space research applications, we have a targeted detection and tracking, and also the characterizing a sensor for characterization of aging structure, because most of this structure which is made of steel and which is steel and is a ferromagnetic, but due to long surface period, their ferromagnetism changes, and that is the detail. And that is the and if we can detect what are the changes are taking place, then we can really get a idea that whether this material can be used at the site or it can be time has come for their retirement. So these are the different applications. This is the applications of this amorphous alloy as a sensor. You see, this is the amorphous ribbon. There is a coil and there is a permanent magnet. This can be used as a speed sensors, and this is used in the automobile industries. This is also used, this is that sensor. This is also used to monitor the injection of the how much controlling the fuel in the engine. This is also used to monitor the detection as a proximity sensor. This can also be used as a proximity sensor to determine whether the car is coming and which type of car is coming. Also, if you can have a database. And this is also can be used as a detection of what I call space application as a flux gate magnetometer. This can be used as a flux gate magnetometer. And to understand in flux gate magnetometers, particularly space application, they used it to find the direction. So you can see the output of the signal is more along this direction. Output of the signal is more at this direction, but here is the less, because Earth magnetic field is between the north or south and east west. So it should expected that it will give a less field. So this can give you an example how this amorphous, this is this amorphous alloy, and this is the crystalline counterpart. How the crystalline alloy this looks like, and compared to this amorphous one. Can you stop for 5 minutes and again come?
Yes, sir. No problem.
Okay. Okay. So this is that pipeline and there is all the chance that there is a leakage or the ruptures of this pipeline. So there is a need for early what is there? We have to generate a wave at the one end, and this generate